Welcome back to Golden Rule Radio, your weekly summation for the precious metals markets and the news that moves those markets. We will focus not only on the prices, but also on the underlying fundamentals. And we're going to jump right into gold this week.
Last week, we suggested that gold would take a slight respite on its march up to $12.95. It did that for about a day or so and did move right up.
At a new high?
At a new high.
Yeah, we hit $12.9880. I mean, we're up over 2% from last week's show. We didn't see quite the correction that we thought was possible, coming down to about that 1230 level. And is that bullish? Is that encouraging? I mean, what are you seeing here in terms of this pause?
Well, it's worth pointing out that the long-term trend line that had been declining has now been broken to the north.
Yeah, if you look at these longer-term charts going back to about 2008, 2009, where we set some floors and obviously the ultimate ceiling, we have about a 6-year trend line on the top end that we actually just broke for the very first time.
So why is that important, Miles?
I think we are seeing that next leg up and a little bit of confirmation that everybody in the metals market has been hoping for.
And to last week's show, you also broke above that 2-4 line that you guys put up on the charts.
Everything leading up to this with gold has been constructive. We've been having higher highs, higher lows, and now we're breaking to a new high. For yesterday's close was a new high. We're looking at the 1300s being the next resistance, and once we get above there, I think we're off to the races once we get into that 14 level.
Well, and it has been exciting action, and I appreciate both of you, too, last week saying that you did predict us going past that previous high of the 1295, which we've done, and silver followed suit a little bit. The gold-silver ratio is relatively unchanged, but jumping into silver, Miles, take off there.
Real quickly, Tori, before we leave gold, let's just kind of recap these because we do talk about a lot of the technical short and long term. So last week, we looked at some short-term charts, we looked at some Elliott wave theory, and we moved above that. This week, we're looking at some longer-term charts. We're looking at some trend lines that we've moved against. We have some bearish divergence against this bullish trend, which always indicates that you're going to eventually have the continuation of the trend after a short break. My gut tells me we are finally going to see that pullback that we've all been hoping for, maybe to a fib correction level around 1185, 1187, which is exactly where those two trend lines, the compressing pennant, are going to meet, and then we should be off to the races from there. So gold, I think, is looking very bullish.
Silver is following gold, however, it is languishing a little bit. And if we get this pullback, you better be buying silver.
We did hit a high of 1775. We pulled back a little bit, but the gold-silver ratio, as I mentioned earlier, is relatively unchanged. And the reason Robert says buy silver is it will outperform gold when they're both climbing. And that ratio will drop back down below the 70s on its way ultimately into the 50s and even lower. So platinum and palladium, same thing. Every show we talk about the need to buy the more undervalued asset. That still is platinum at this point. What about other markets, though, you guys?
Well, the pullback in gold could correspond to what we talked about last week as a speculative rise in the dollar. The dollar came down right into that 96.5 level like we've been talking about, which is a fib level. I think it stopped at 96.51. So being fairly accurate there, I think we are in the show. We're looking at the dollar potentially having a little rally in here, which means, again, from last week, maybe a sell-off in the euro, maybe a sell-off in the pound, maybe the yen strengthening as well, and pushing that dollar index back up a bit. But if we, again, break below that 96.5 level, we're going to fall apart with the dollar, and gold's going to rise.
That's right. You know, the dollar's up a little bit versus the euro just because they have eased their inflation forecast. There is a European Central Bank meeting tomorrow. The plan, it appears, is to begin cutting their ultra-loose monetary policy, but the dollar weakened against the yen. So you've got to look at the entire basket of currencies, and a lot of that has to do with what's coming on what they're calling now Super Thursday.
Yeah, the dollar's down 8, 9, 10% against the yen, against the euro, against the British pound, obviously with the election coming up. So like Tori said, I'd expect a little bit of a rally in the dollar, maybe up to around the 97, 97.5 mark.
But it will still remain in that downward channel that we're looking at and we have been following for the last number of months. Maybe a break in that downward trend, just popping right back up just a bit in the dollar.
And I'll call it right now, dollar's going sub 90.
So the dollar will move tomorrow with this Super Thursday. Just so you know, we've got the Comey testimony, we have the UK general election, and then we have that European Central Bank meeting on top of the Qatar and Middle East pressures. So the dollar will move tomorrow. Some of them will move up, some of it will move down, and it'll be interesting to see what the net effect is.
we have to mention U.S. oil falling out of bed today, down 4%, down into the $45 a barrel range. And that was because of the inventory was expected to be down 3 million barrels, and it was actually up over 3 million barrels. So there was a 6 million barrel difference between what the market expected and the actual number.
And all that despite the geopolitical tensions with Saudi Arabia and Qatar, as we just alluded to. So keep your eye on that. So for this week's recommendations, pop some popcorn, sit back and see what happens with Super Thursday tomorrow, see what happens with the U.S. dollar, see what happens with the gold price. Does 1,300 hold as a resistance point, or do we break through freely? And so this is Golden Rule Radio signing off this week. Follow us on Twitter at ICA Gold, and you can give us a call as well at the number below, and subscribe to us by clicking the subscribe button below this video as well.
Thanks for listening.
And have a great week.